morning sun came through the tall windows of room 204 at Riverside High School. Mrs. Victoria Hammond stood at her desk, arranging papers with careful hands. Everything in her classroom had a place. The desk sat in perfect rows. Books lined the shelves by author name. Even the pencils in the cup on her desk all pointed the same direction. Mrs. Hammond was 58 years old. She had taught English at this school for 30 years. Her gray hair was pulled back in a tight bun. She wore a dark blue suit with a white blouse. 3 pearl buttons closed at her neck. Her glasses hung on a chain around her neck. When she looked at students, her eyes were cold and sharp. On the wall behind her desk hung certificates and awards. Teacher of the Year 1998, Excellence in Education 2005, Outstanding Service 2010. Students who walked into her room saw these awards first. They were meant to see them first. The bell rang. Students filed into the classroom. They knew the rules. No talking. Take your seat. Books out. Mrs. Hammond did not tolerate noise or disorder. She stood by her desk and watched each student enter. Her face showed no warmth, no smile, just watchful eyes that missed nothing. Take your seats, she said. Her voice was firm and clear. Students obeyed quickly. Mrs. Hammond began taking attendance. She called each name from her list. Jennifer Adams. Here. Michael Brennan. Present. Sarah Chen. Here, Mrs. Hammond. The classroom door opened. Everyone turned to look. A girl stood in the doorway. She was 16, thin, with dark skin and hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans that were a bit too short and a sweater with a small hole near the bottom. Her backpack looked old and heavy. In her arms, she carried 3 textbooks that had seen better days. The covers were worn. Someone else's name was crossed out on the inside covers, yes? Mrs. Hammond said. She did not move from her desk. I'm sorry I'm late, the girl said quietly. I'm new. The office told me to come to room 204. This is advanced English, right? Mrs. Hammond's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at the girl from head to toe. Her eyes stopped at the worn sneakers, the old backpack, the second-hand books. Your name? Amara Johnson. Mrs. Hammond looked down at her attendance sheet. She ran her finger down the list. Amara, she said, saying the name wrong. It sounded harsh the way she said it. It's Amara, the girl corrected softly, with the emphasis on the second part. Mrs. Hammond did not say the name again. She made a mark on her paper. You're 3 weeks late to this semester. This is an advanced class. We've already covered significant material. Students in this class were selected based on their test scores and previous performance. Yes, ma'am. I transferred from Lincoln High. I was in advanced classes there too. The counselor said my scores qualified me for this class. Mrs. Hammond's expression did not change. We'll see about that. Take a seat in the back. There's an empty desk in the corner. Amara walked to the back of the room. She could feel every eye on her. The other students watched her pass. Some looked curious. Others looked away quickly. She reached the desk in the far corner by the window and sat down. The desk wobbled slightly. Someone had carved initials into the woodtop. Mrs. Hammond continued with her lesson. She was teaching about American poetry. She talked about Robert Frost and Emily Dickinson. She spoke with passion about their work. Her cold voice became almost warm when she discussed poetry. But she never looked at the back corner where Amara sat. Who can tell me the theme of The Road Not Taken? Mrs. Hammond asked the class. Several hands went up. Amara raised her hand too. She knew this poem. She had studied it at her old school. She had written an essay about it that her previous teacher had loved. Mrs. Hammond called on a blonde girl in the front row. Jessica? It's about choices, Jessica said. About how the choices we make shape our lives. Adequate, Mrs. Hammond said. Though there's more depth to explore. Michael? A boy near the window spoke up. Mrs. Hammond nodded and added to his answer. She called on 3 more students. She never looked at Amara's raised hand. After a while, Amara lowered it. The class continued. Mrs. Hammond assigned reading from their textbook. She gave instructions for an essay due next week. Students wrote down the assignment. Amara wrote it down too, but she worried. The textbook they were using was different from the one she had. She would need to go to the library. When the bell rang, students packed their bags quickly. They wanted to leave Mrs. Hammond's classroom. The air always felt heavy in there, tense, like one wrong move would bring harsh words. Amara stayed in her seat. She waited until the other students left. Then she walked to Mrs. Hammond's desk. The teacher was sorting papers, not looking up. "Excuse me, Mrs. Hammond?" Mrs. Hammond continued sorting papers. "Yes? I noticed the textbook you mentioned is different from the one I have. Can I borrow a copy from the classroom? Or should I go to the library?" "We don't lend out textbooks. Go to the library. They may have a copy." "Okay. Also, I wanted to ask about the reading list for the semester. I'd like to catch up on what the class has already covered." Mrs. Hammond finally looked up. Her eyes were cold behind her glasses. "Miss Johnson, this class has been in session for 3 weeks. The other students were prepared from day one. I cannot slow down the entire class because you arrived late. You'll need to catch up on your own time. I suggest you work hard if you want to remain in this advanced class." The word stung. Amara felt her face grow warm. "Yes, ma'am. I just thought, the reading list is posted on the school website. Class syllabi are available in the main office. Is there anything else?" "No, ma'am." "Then I suggest you hurry. You'll be late for your next class." Amara left the room quickly. Her eyes burned, but she would not cry. Not here, not where anyone could see. She walked down the hallway toward her next class. Behind her, she heard Mrs. Hammond's door close firmly. In the classroom, Mrs. Hammond sat at her desk alone. She made a note next to Amara's name on the attendance sheet. "Transfer student, unprepared." She added Amara's name to her grade book. Then she went back to sorting papers, her face showing nothing at all. The rest of the day passed slowly for Amara. She went to her other classes, math, history, science. In those classes, the teachers were kind. They welcomed her. They offered to help her catch up. They pronounced her name correctly the first time. But advanced English was the class she needed for her college applications. It was the class that mattered most. And already she could tell it would be the hardest class she had ever taken. Not because the work was difficult, but because of the cold woman who taught it. After school, Amara stopped at the library. She found the textbook for Mrs. Hammond's class. She also found the reading list online. Looking at it, her heart sank. There were 12 books on the list. The class had already discussed 4 of them. She would need to read those 4 books plus keep up with new assignments, all while working at the diner after school to help her mother pay rent. As she walked home in the autumn cold, Amara thought about her first day. Most of it had been fine. Good even. But room 204 felt different, felt wrong. The way Mrs. Hammond had looked at her. The way she had said her name incorrectly and never tried to fix it. The way she had sent her to the back corner. Amara had seen that look before. She knew what it meant. She just had not expected to see it here. Not from a teacher. Not in a classroom that was supposed to be about learning and growing. But she would not quit. Her mother had not raised a quitter. She would work twice as hard as everyone else if she had to. She would prove that she belonged in that advanced class, even if Mrs. Hammond never wanted her there. 3 weeks passed since Amara's first day at Riverside High. She worked hard every single day. She stayed up late reading the books she had missed. She took notes in class. She raised her hand to answer questions. She completed every assignment with care, but nothing changed in room 204. Mrs. Hammond still called her Amara with the wrong emphasis. She still ignored Amara's raised hand during class discussions. When she did call on Amara, which was rare, she listened to the answer with a slight frown. Then she would turn to another student and ask them to expand on that point or add more depth, as if Amara's answer was not good enough on its own. The worst part was the grading. Amara had written 3 essays so far. She had spent hours on each one. She checked her grammar. She made her arguments clear. She included examples from the texts. She revised and edited until the words were perfect. Her first essay came back with a C+. Red marks covered the page. Needs more analysis. Unclear point. Simplistic reading. Amara read through the comments carefully. Then she looked at Jessica's essay on the desk next to her. Jessica had received an A. Amara had read Jessica's essay when they traded papers for peer review. It made similar points to Amara's essay. The structure was almost the same, but Jessica's paper had only 2 small corrections. Great work was written at the top in red pen. The second essay came back with a B. Better, but still not what Amara deserved. She knew it was good work. Her teacher at Lincoln High would have given it an A. The third essay broke her heart. It was about Langston Hughes and his poem, I Too. Amara had poured herself into that essay. She wrote about hope and dignity, about claiming your place at the table, about being seen and valued. She wrote 5 drafts before she turned it in. When she got it back, there was a "see you" at the top. Her hands shook as she read the comments. Surface-level analysis. Expected more sophistication. You've missed the deeper themes here. Amara stared at that "C" until the letters blurred. She had not missed the deeper themes. She had lived them. But Mrs. Hammond did not want to see that. After school that day, Amara went to her job at Rosie's Diner on Main Street. She had been working there for 2 months now. Her mother had found work as a home health aide, but the pay was low. They needed Amara's wages to make rent each month. The diner was always busy after school. Students came in for fries and milkshakes. Workers stopped by for coffee and pie. Amara tied on her apron and started taking orders. She smiled at customers even though she felt tired. Even though her mind was still on that seat. "You okay, honey?" Rosie asked. She was the owner, a kind woman in her 60s with gray curls and warm brown eyes. "Just tired," Amara said. "You working too hard? School and this job, it's a lot for a young girl." "We need the money, Miss Rosie." Rosie patted her arm. "I know, baby, I know. But don't forget to take care of yourself, too." Amara worked until 9 that night. Then she walked home through the dark streets. Her feet hurt. Her shoulders ached from carrying heavy trays. When she got home, her mother was already asleep on the couch. She had worked a double shift. Amara covered her with a blanket, then went to her own small room. She sat at her desk and pulled out her homework. Math problems, history reading, a science lab report, and another essay for Mrs. Hammond's class. This one was due in 3 days. Amara stared at the blank page. What was the point? No matter how hard she worked, Mrs. Hammond would find something wrong, some reason to give her a lower grade than she deserved. But she started writing anyway, because that's what she did. She did not quit. At school the next day, something changed. Sarah Chen started talking to Amara. Sarah sat 3 rows ahead in Mrs. Hammond's class. She had shiny black hair cut straight at her shoulders and glasses with purple frames. She was quiet but smart. She always had the right answers. "Hey," Sarah said, sitting down next to Amara at lunch. "You're in my English class, right?" "Yeah, I'm Amara. I know. I'm Sarah. I wanted to talk to you about something." Amara took a bite of her sandwich and waited. "I saw your grade on the Hughes essay. I read it during peer review, remember? It was really good." "Like really good? Better than mine. But you got a C and I got an A." Amara looked down at her food. She did not want to cry in the cafeteria. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not ready for advanced class. "That's garbage," Sarah said firmly. "I've been in Mrs. Hammond's class since September. I've watched her grade your work. It's not fair. She's harder on you than anyone else. What do you want me to say? She's the teacher. She decides the grades. It's not right, though. Have you noticed how she treats you in class?" Amara had noticed. Of course she had noticed. But saying it out loud made it real. Made it something she had to deal with. "I don't want to cause trouble. I'm new here. I need to do well in this class for my college applications. You are doing well. She's just not seeing it." Sarah pushed her glasses up her nose. "I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to ask her why she's grading your work differently." "Sarah, no. Please don't. It'll just make things worse." But Sarah had already made up her mind. That afternoon, after English class ended, Sarah stayed behind. Amara tried to pull her out of the classroom, but Sarah shook her head. "Wait for me outside," she whispered. Amara stood in the hallway, her heart beating fast. She could hear voices through the door but could not make out the words. After 5 minutes, Sarah came out. Her face was red. "What happened?" Amara asked. She denied everything, said she grades everyone fairly, said maybe you're just not understanding the material. Sarah looked angry. "She suggested that you might be more comfortable in regular English instead of advanced." Amara felt something cold in her stomach. "She wants me out of the class. She's wrong, though. You belong there. Your work is good. She's just—" Sarah stopped. "She's just treating you differently. And I think we both know why." They walked down the hallway together. Neither of them said what they were both thinking. But Amara knew. She had known from the first day. The way Mrs. Hammond looked at her. The way she said her name. The way she dismissed her work without really reading it. It was about the color of her skin. It had always been about that. That evening, Mrs. Hammond sat alone in her large house. The house was too big for one person. It had been her husband's dream house. 4 bedrooms, a big kitchen, a yard with flower gardens. But her husband had died 5 years ago. Now the house just felt empty. She ate dinner alone at the dining room table. After dinner, she graded papers. She was strict but fair, she told herself. She had high standards. Students needed to meet those standards. She picked up Amara Johnson's latest essay. She read the first paragraph. Then the second. By the third paragraph, she had her red pen out. She marked words and phrases. She wrote questions in the margins. Is this really what you think? Needs more support. Try harder. When she finished, she gave it a B. Better than the last one, she supposed. Maybe the girl was learning. She put the essay in her bag and went to the living room. On the mantel were old photos. Her wedding day. Her husband smiling at the camera. Family photos from long ago. In one photo, she stood next to her father. He had been an important man in their small town. A businessman, a leader. He had taught her many things. How to stand up straight. How to speak with authority. How to maintain standards and expectations. Her father had also taught her who belonged where. Who was meant for what. She had never questioned those lessons when she was young. They were just the way things were. The natural order. When she met Richard, her husband, things became complicated. Richard had different ideas. More modern ideas. He challenged her sometimes, gently but firmly. They had arguments about it over the years. But she loved him, so she listened. Sometimes after he died, she went back to the old ways. The comfortable ways. The ways her father had taught her. It was easier not to question things. Easier to believe in the natural order. Mrs. Hammond turned off the lights and went to bed. She did not think about the girl in the back corner of her classroom. She did not think about the unfair grades or the cold treatment. She thought about her lesson plan for tomorrow. About the quiz she would give. About maintaining her standards. Amara's mother noticed something was wrong. At dinner that Friday night, she watched her daughter push food around her plate. "What's bothering you, baby?" she asked. "Nothing, Mama. Don't tell me nothing. I'm your mother. I can see when something's wrong." Amara put down her fork. "There's a teacher at school." "My English teacher. She doesn't like me." "What do you mean she doesn't like you?" She treats me different. She grades my work harder. She ignores me in class. I'm trying so hard, Mama. I'm doing everything right. But it doesn't matter to her." Her mother's face grew serious. "Is this about—" "I think so. Yes." They sat in silence for a moment. This was not the first time. It would not be the last, but it hurt every time. Especially when it came from someone who was supposed to help you learn. Someone who was supposed to see your potential. "Do you want me to go to the school? Talk to someone?" Amara shook her head. "Not yet. I want to try to handle it myself. I needed to tell you." Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. "You're strong, Amara, stronger than you know. But you don't have to handle everything alone. If it gets worse, we go to the school together. Okay?" "Okay, Mama." That night, Amara lay in bed thinking. She thought about quitting. About transferring to regular English. About making things easier. But that would mean letting Mrs. Hammond win. That would mean accepting that she did not belong in the advanced class. That she was not good enough, and that was a lie. She was good enough. She was smart and hardworking and capable. She belonged in that classroom just as much as anyone else. More than some of them, she would not quit. But she did not know how much longer she could keep trying so hard just to be treated fairly, just to be seen. Monday morning came cold and gray. Amara walked to school with her jacket pulled tight. Winter was coming early this year. She could see her breath in the air. Her worn sneakers were not warm enough, and her toes felt numb by the time she reached the school building. In English class, Mrs. Hammond stood at the front of the room with an announcement. "Class, we will begin our major project today. This project will count for 30% of your semester grade. You will each research and present on a topic in American literature. I will assign your topics." Students shifted in their seats. Major projects always cause stress. 30% of the grade was significant. They needed to do well. Mrs. Hammond walked around the room, handing each student a slip of paper with their assigned topic. "Jennifer, you have Emily Dickinson. Michael, you'll research Mark Twain. Sarah, I'm giving you Flannery O'Connor." She continued around the room. Amara watched as each student received their assignment. Classic American authors, important writers, the kind of topics that would look good on a project. Finally, Mrs. Hammond reached the back corner. She placed a slip of paper on Amara's desk without looking at her. Then she walked back to the front of the room. Amara looked down at her paper. Her stomach dropped. Contemporary urban fiction, an analysis of modern street literature. She read it again, then a third time. Around her, other students were comparing topics. Jessica had been assigned F. Scott Fitzgerald. Michael was already talking about Huckleberry Finn. Sarah turned around and looked at Amara. When she saw Amara's face, she reached for the paper. Sarah read the topic, and her eyes went wide. She looked at Mrs. Hammond, then back at Amara. Her face showed anger and disbelief. The topics everyone else received were about literary classics. Writers who had shaped American literature. Writers who were studied in universities. Amara's topic was different. Mrs. Hammond had given her the only non-academic topic in the entire class. The message was clear. This was the kind of literature Amara should study. This was where she belonged. After class, Sarah grabbed Amara's arm. "This is insane. I can't even believe she did this." "It's fine," Amara said quietly, but it was not fine. Her hands were shaking. "It's not fine. Everyone else got real literary authors. Classic writers. She gave you street literature? What does that even mean? And why you? Why only you?" "I know why," Amara said. Her voice came out harder than she expected. "We both know why." Other students were leaving the classroom. Some of them looked uncomfortable. They had seen the difference in topics. They knew it was wrong, but no one said anything. They just gathered their books and left quickly. "I'm going to say something," Sarah said. "This is too much. This is over the line." "Sarah, don't, please," but Sarah was already walking back into the classroom. Mrs. Hammond was erasing the board, her back turned. "Mrs. Hammond." Sarah's voice was loud and clear. "I need to talk to you about the project topics." Mrs. Hammond turned around slowly. "Yes, Miss Chen?" "I think there's been a mistake. Amara's topic is different from everyone else's. It's not a classic author. It's not even the same kind of literature. There is no mistake. I assigned topics based on what I thought would suit each student's interests and background. But Amara didn't ask for a different topic. She should get the same kind of assignment as everyone else. It's not fair." Mrs. Hammond's face hardened. Her voice became cold. "Miss Chen, I don't appreciate you questioning my teaching methods. I have been doing this for 30 years. I know how to assign appropriate work to my students." Amara appeared in the doorway. "Sarah, let's just go." But Sarah was not done. "There's nothing about Amara's background that means she should study different literature than us. She's just as capable of researching Hemingway or Steinbeck. I assigned Miss Johnson a topic that would be more comfortable for her, something she would understand. Something relevant to her experience." The words hung in the air. More comfortable, relevant to her experience. As if Amara could not understand the same literature as white students. As if her experience was so different that she needed special, separate assignments. Amara felt her face grow hot. Anger rose in her chest. For weeks she had stayed quiet. She had accepted the bad grades. She had ignored the cold treatment. But this was too much. "Mrs. Hammond," Amara said, stepping into the classroom, "I would like a different topic. I don't want to write about urban fiction. I want to write about a classic American author like everyone else." Mrs. Hammond crossed her arms. "The topics have been assigned. I won't be changing them. But it's not the same assignment. You gave everyone else literary classics. I gave you what I thought would be best. Now both of you need to leave. I have work to do." "This isn't right," Sarah said. "You're treating her differently because—" "Enough." Mrs. Hammond's voice was sharp. "Leave my classroom now or I will write both of you up for insubordination." Amara pulled Sarah toward the door. They left quickly, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallway. Behind them they heard Mrs. Hammond's door slam shut. In the hallway, Amara leaned against the wall. She felt like crying but would not let herself. Not here, not where Mrs. Hammond might see. Sarah pulled out her phone. "I recorded that. Not the whole thing, but the part where she talked about you being more comfortable with urban fiction, about it being relevant to your experience. That's discrimination, Amara. That's actual discrimination. Put your phone away. I don't want to make a big thing out of this." It already is a big thing. She basically said you're not smart enough for classic literature. She said you belong with street literature because of who you are, because of how you look. Amara knew Sarah was right. But making it official, making it a complaint, that felt scary. That felt like opening a door she could not close. I need to think about this. Let me think. That afternoon, Amara could not focus at work. She messed up orders. She forgot to refill coffee. Rosie noticed. Honey, what's wrong? You've been somewhere else all afternoon. Amara told her about the project. About the topic. About Mrs. Hammond's words. As she talked, Rosie's face grew serious. That teacher needs to be reported. That's not right. That's not how you treat a student. I don't want to cause trouble. Baby, you're not causing trouble. She caused it. She's the one treating you wrong. Rosie put her hands on Amara's shoulders. Listen to me. My daughter went through something like this in school. We stayed quiet. We didn't want to make waves. And you know what happened? It got worse. That teacher kept treating her bad, and my girl started to believe she wasn't smart enough. Started to believe she didn't belong. Don't let that happen to you. That evening, Amara sat with her mother at their small kitchen table. She told her everything. Every unfair grade. Every ignored hand. Every cold look. And now this project, this final insult. Her mother listened quietly. When Amara finished, there was fire in her mother's eyes. We're going to the school tomorrow. We're going to talk to the principal. This ends now. Mama, what if it makes things worse? Worse, baby, how can it get worse? She's already treating you like you don't belong, like you're not as good as the other students. That stops tomorrow. But before they could schedule a meeting with the principal, something happened. Something that would change everything. The next day after school, Mrs. Hammond walked to the parking lot carrying 2 heavy bags. One had books for grading. The other had supplies for her classroom. She had parked far from the building. The good spots were always taken by the time she left for the day. The parking lot was mostly empty. Most teachers and students had left an hour ago. Mrs. Hammond walked carefully. The bags were heavy. Her arms ached from carrying them. She did not see the crack in the pavement. Her foot caught on the raised concrete. Suddenly she was falling. She tried to catch herself, but the bags made her unbalanced. She hit the ground hard on her right side. Pain shot through her ankle and ribs. The bags flew from her hands. Books scattered across the pavement. Papers flew in the wind. She tried to get up but could not put weight on her ankle. It screamed with pain. Mrs. Hammond looked around. The parking lot was empty. No, wait. There was someone in the distance, walking toward the street. Too far away to notice her. Help, she called out, but her voice came out weak. The fall had knocked the wind from her. Help me. The person kept walking. They had not heard her. Mrs. Hammond tried to pull herself up using a nearby car. Pain blazed through her side. She gasped and fell back down. Tears came to her eyes. From pain, from fear, from the sudden understanding that she was alone and hurt and no one knew she was there. Then she heard footsteps. Fast footsteps. Someone running. Oh my God. Mrs. Hammond. Mrs. Hammond looked up. Through tears of pain, she saw a face she knew. The face of the girl from the back corner of her classroom. The girl she had been so cold to. The girl whose work she had graded unfairly. The girl she had insulted just yesterday with that terrible project assignment. Amara dropped her own backpack and knelt beside her teacher. Are you okay? Where does it hurt? Mrs. Hammond tried to speak but could only gasp. The pain in her ribs was sharp every time she breathed. Don't try to move. I'm calling for help. Amara pulled out her phone and dialed 911. She spoke quickly and clearly to the dispatcher. My teacher fell in the parking lot at Riverside High School. She's hurt. She needs an ambulance. While they waited, Amara took off her own jacket and put it over Mrs. Hammond. You're going to be okay. Help is coming. Just stay still. Mrs. Hammond looked at the girl kneeling beside her. The girl she had treated so badly. The girl who had every reason to walk away. To leave her there. To let someone else find her. But Amara had not walked away. She had run to help. Why? Mrs. Hammond whispered through the pain. Why what? Why are you helping me? Amara looked confused by the question. Because you're hurt. Because you need help, but I've treated you. I know, but that doesn't matter right now. Right now you need help, and I'm here. Other people started to arrive. Another teacher who had stayed late. The school security guard. They all rushed over. Amara stayed by Mrs. Hammond's side until the ambulance came. She gathered up all the scattered books and papers. She made sure nothing was left behind. The paramedics arrived and began checking Mrs. Hammond's injuries. Probably a sprained ankle, possibly bruised or broken ribs. They needed to take her to the hospital. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, Mrs. Hammond looked for Amara. The girl stood nearby, holding Mrs. Hammond's bags and papers. Their eyes met. Mrs. Hammond saw concern on Amara's face. Real concern, no anger, no satisfaction. Just genuine worry for another person who was hurt. "Thank you," Mrs. Hammond said. Amara nodded. "I hope you feel better soon." The ambulance drove away. Amara stood in the parking lot holding her teacher's things. She had missed her shift at the diner. She would lose those wages. Her mother needed that money. But she had not thought about that when she saw Mrs. Hammond fall. She had just thought about helping. Sarah appeared from inside the school building. "Amara, I saw the ambulance." "What happened?" "Mrs. Hammond fell. She's hurt pretty bad. And you helped her, after everything she's done to you?" Amara looked at her friend. "What was I supposed to do? Leave her there?" Sarah shook her head with a sad smile. "Most people would have. Most people would say she deserved it. Nobody deserves to be hurt and alone." They walked toward the school office to drop off Mrs. Hammond's belongings. Sarah put her arm around Amara's shoulders. "You're a better person than most people I know." Amara did not feel like a better person. She just felt tired. Tired from working so hard in a class where she was not wanted. Tired from fighting to prove she belonged. Tired from being treated like she was less than everyone else. But she also felt something else. Something she could not quite name. When Mrs. Hammond had looked at her with those surprised, confused eyes, Amara had seen something new. For the first time, Mrs. Hammond had really seen her. Not as the transfer student in the back corner. Not as someone who did not belong. But as a person, as someone who had made a choice to help when help was needed. Maybe nothing would change. Probably nothing would change. Mrs. Hammond would come back to school and things would go back to the way they were. The cold treatment, the unfair grades, the discrimination that lived in the silence between words. But maybe something had shifted. Just a little. Just enough for Mrs. Hammond to wonder why a girl she had treated so badly would stop to help her. Would call for an ambulance. Would stay by her side until help arrived. Amara did not help her teacher because she expected anything in return. She helped because her mother had raised her to help people who needed it, even people who had not been kind to her, even people who had hurt her. Because being better than someone's bad behavior was more important than revenge. Being kind was more important than being right. As she walked home that evening, Amara thought about the look on Mrs. Hammond's face. The confusion, the surprise, the question why. Maybe that question would keep Mrs. Hammond up at night. Maybe it would make her think. Maybe it would change nothing at all. But Amara had done what she knew was right, and somehow that felt like enough. Mrs. Victoria Hammond sat in her living room 3 days after the fall. Her right ankle was wrapped in a thick bandage. The doctor said it was a bad sprain. Her ribs were bruised but not broken. They had given her pain medicine and told her to rest for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks. She had not missed 2 weeks of school in 30 years. But the doctor was firm. She could barely walk. Standing for long periods would be impossible. She needed time to heal. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Mrs. Hammond sat in her late husband's chair by the window. Outside, autumn leaves fell from the trees in her yard. Soon it would be winter. Another winter alone in this big house. She thought about the parking lot, the fall, the pain, the fear when she realized no one was there to help. And then Amara's face appearing above her, the girl's worried eyes, her quick action, her kindness. Mrs. Hammond could not stop thinking about it, could not stop asking herself that question, why? She had treated that girl terribly. She knew it now. Sitting here alone with nothing but time to think, she could not hide from it anymore. She had been cold, unfair, dismissive. She had given Amara poor grades that she had not earned. She had ignored her in class. She had assigned her that insulting project topic. And still Amara had stopped to help. Had called for an ambulance. Had stayed until help arrived. Had even gathered up all the scattered papers and books. Mrs. Hammond picked up her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the school office number. She called and asked them to send her the work she had been grading. She needed something to do, something to occupy her mind. The next day, a young teacher named Mr. Peters brought over a box of papers and books from her classroom. He chatted for a few minutes about school news, then left. Mrs. Hammond was glad to see him go. She did not want company. She wanted to work. She pulled the box toward her and started sorting through the papers. Tests, quizzes, essays. She organized them by class period. Then she started grading. She came to Amara's latest essay. It was about The Great Gatsby. Mrs. Hammond began reading with her red pen ready. She would grade it the same way she had graded all of Amara's work. Critically, looking for every error, every weakness, but something was different this time. As she read, she heard Amara's voice in her head. Because you're hurt. Because you need help. Simple words. Honest words. Words that came from someone who saw another person in pain and chose to help them. Mrs. Hammond read the essay again. Really read it this time. Not looking for what was wrong, but looking at what was actually on the page. The essay was good. Very good. Amara wrote about the American dream and how it fails people. She compared Gatsby's empty parties to modern society's empty pursuits. She made connections between the 1920s and today. Her arguments were clear and well supported. Her writing was strong. Mrs. Hammond looked at the grade she had planned to give. A B. That's what she would have written. That's what she had been prepared to write before she even read the essay. But that was not fair. That was not honest. This essay deserved better. This essay was easily an A. Mrs. Hammond sat back in her chair. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up her pen. She wrote A at the top of the page. Then she added a note. Excellent analysis. Clear writing. Strong arguments. Well done. She felt strange writing those words, but they were true. They were what the essay deserved. What Amara deserved. Mrs. Hammond set the essay aside and picked up the next paper. It was from Jessica, one of her favorite students. She began reading. The essay was adequate. The arguments were basic. The writing was acceptable but not remarkable. Mrs. Hammond had planned to give it an A. That's what she always gave Jessica. But reading it now, after reading Amara's essay, she could see the difference. Jessica's work was fine. Just fine, it was not exceptional. If she gave Jessica an A and Amara an A, that was not honest. That was not fair. Mrs. Hammond put her pen down and rubbed her eyes. She was tired. The pain medicine made her head foggy, but through the fog she was starting to see things clearly for the first time in a long time. She had not been fair. Not even close. She had graded Amara harder than everyone else. She had looked for reasons to give her lower grades. She had dismissed her work without truly reading it. She had made up her mind about who Amara was and what she could do before giving her any real chance. And why? Why had she done that? Mrs. Hammond got up slowly, wincing from the pain in her ribs. She walked to the mantel where the old photos stood. She picked up the picture of her father. He looked stern and proud in the photo. A successful man. A respected man. A racist man. She had never used that word before. Not about her father. Not about herself. It was an ugly word. A word that meant hatred and cruelty. She was not hateful. She was not cruel. She was a teacher. She had dedicated her life to education. But sitting there in her empty house looking at her father's photo, Mrs. Hammond had to face the truth. Her father had taught her that some people were better than others. That some people belonged in certain places and others did not. That there was a natural order to things. She had absorbed those lessons as a child. They had become part of how she saw the world. Part of how she saw people, even after her father died. Even after she married Richard, who had tried to show her a different way of thinking. Richard, her gentle, patient husband. He had challenged her views so many times. They had argued about it. Not big fights, but steady disagreements over the years. He would point out her biases, ask her to think differently, encourage her to see people as individuals, not as groups. She had listened sometimes, but mostly she had dismissed his concerns. She told herself she was not prejudiced. She taught all students, didn't she? She had high standards for everyone, but that was a lie. She had not held everyone to the same standards. She had held some students to impossible standards while giving others every benefit of the doubt. She had seen what she expected to see instead of what was really there. Mrs. Hammond put the photo down. She walked to the bookshelf and ran her finger along the spines. All her favorite authors were there. Hemingway, Fitzgerald, Faulkner, Frost, Dickinson. The classics she had taught for decades. But there were gaps. Huge gaps. She had never taught Langston Hughes in depth, never assigned Toni Morrison or James Baldwin, never included Maya Angelou in her curriculum, except as a brief mention during Black History Month. She told herself it was because her syllabus was already full, because she had to focus on the canon, but the real reason was that she had never thought those voices were as important, as valuable, as worthy of study. She had been wrong. She had been so terribly wrong. Mrs. Hammond returned to her chair and picked up Amara's essay again. She read it a third time. The girl's insight, her understanding, her ability to connect literature to life, it was all there. It had always been there. Mrs. Hammond just had not wanted to see it. The next few days were difficult. Mrs. Hammond went through all of Amara's work from the semester. Every essay, every quiz, every assignment. She read them again with honest eyes. With fair eyes, the grades she had given were not fair. Not even close. Amara's work was consistently good, sometimes excellent. But Mrs. Hammond had found reasons to mark her down. Too simplistic, needs more depth, unclear reasoning. Comments that were vague enough to justify any grade she wanted to give. When she looked at other students' work with the same critical eye, she saw that they often had the same weaknesses. But she had been generous with them. She had given them good grades anyway. She had encouraged them, praised them, told them they were doing well. She had not done that for Amara. She had done the opposite. She had been harsh, discouraging, cold. Mrs. Hammond put her head in her hands. Shame washed over her. Deep burning shame. She was a teacher. She was supposed to help students learn and grow. She was supposed to see their potential and nurture it. She was supposed to be fair. Instead, she had let her prejudices guide her. She had treated a bright, hard-working student as if she did not belong, as if she was not capable, as if her work was never good enough, and that student, despite everything, had stopped to help when Mrs. Hammond was hurt and alone. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Mrs. Hammond got up slowly and made her way to the door. It was the mail carrier with a package. After he left, she saw a card had been delivered too. A get well card. She opened it. Inside was a card signed by many of her students. Hope you feel better soon, Mrs. Hammond. We miss you in class. Get well. Near the bottom, in careful handwriting, was another message. Wishing you a quick recovery. Amara Johnson. Mrs. Hammond stared at that signature. Amara had signed the card. After everything, after the unfair grades, after the cold treatment, after that insulting project assignment, she had still signed the get well card with a kind message. Mrs. Hammond carried the card to her chair and sat down. She held it in her lap and looked at Amara's signature. The girl's kindness shamed her, made her face what she had become, what she had always been, perhaps, but had been able to ignore until now. She thought about going back to school, facing her classroom, facing Amara. What would she say? How could she make this right? An apology seemed too small, too easy. Just words, but words were a start. And maybe actions could follow. Real actions. Real change. Mrs. Hammond pulled a piece of paper from the drawer beside her chair. She picked up her pen. Then she began to write. Dear Amara, she started. Then she stopped. She crumpled the paper and started again. This had to be right. It had to be honest. She could not hide behind polite words or vague apologies. She tried again. Dear Amara, I need to tell you something that I should have realized long ago. I have treated you unfairly this semester. Not just unfairly, wrongly, cruelly even. The words came slowly at first, then faster. Mrs. Hammond wrote about the parking lot, about Amara's kindness, about how it had forced her to look at herself honestly for the first time in years. She wrote about the unfair grades, about the cold treatment, about the insulting project assignment. She did not make excuses. She did not blame her upbringing or her father or anything else. She took responsibility. She admitted what she had done. She acknowledged the pain she had caused. The letter grew longer. Page after page. Mrs. Hammond's hand cramped from writing, but she did not stop. She had so much to say, so much to admit, so much to apologize for. When she finally finished, the sun had set outside. The room was dark except for the lamp beside her chair. Mrs. Hammond read through the letter one more time. It was honest, painful, but honest. She folded it carefully and put it in an envelope. Then she addressed it to Amara. She would mail it tomorrow. Or maybe she would give it to her in person when she returned to school. She was not sure yet. She just knew she had to say these things, had to acknowledge what she had done. But a letter was not enough. Words were not enough. She needed to change, really change. Not just in how she treated Amara, but in how she saw the world, in how she saw people, in what she taught and how she taught it. Mrs. Hammond looked at her bookshelf again. Tomorrow she would start reading the books she had ignored for so long, the voices she had dismissed. She would educate herself, challenge herself, grow. It was late, too late maybe, to undo all the harm she had done over the years, but it was not too late to start being better, to start seeing clearly, to start treating all her students with the fairness and respect they deserved. Mrs. Hammond turned off the lamp and sat in the darkness. Outside, the wind blew through the empty trees. Inside, she felt empty too. But maybe that was good. Maybe she needed to be empty so she could be filled with something better, something true. She thought about Amara kneeling beside her in that parking lot. Because you're hurt. Because you need help, such simple words. But they contained a wisdom that Mrs. Hammond was only beginning to understand. Everyone deserves help when they are hurt. Everyone deserves kindness. Everyone deserves to be seen and valued for who they really are. It had taken a fall. An injury, an act of unexpected kindness. But finally, after all these years, Mrs. Hammond was starting to see. Really see. And what she saw in herself was ugly and shameful, but also changeable. She could be better. She could do better, she had to. She owed it to Amara. She owed it to all her students. She owed it to herself and to the memory of her husband, who had tried so hard to help her see these truths when he was alive. Tomorrow she would start, not with grand gestures or dramatic changes, but with honest reflection, with reading, with learning, with preparing to face Amara and speak the truth. It was a start. Just a start. But after years of going the wrong direction, even the smallest step forward mattered. 2 weeks passed slowly for Mrs. Hammond. Her ankle healed. The bruises on her ribs faded from purple to yellow. The physical pain got better each day, but inside a different kind of pain grew stronger. She spent those 2 weeks reading. Books by authors she had ignored her whole career. Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. Beloved by Toni Morrison. The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Essays by Ta-Nehisi Coates and Roxane Gay. Each book opened her eyes wider. Each one showed her something she had refused to see before. These were not lesser works. These were masterpieces. These authors had as much to teach as Hemingway or Fitzgerald. More perhaps because they spoke truths that Mrs. Hammond had spent a lifetime avoiding. She also pulled out her late husband Richard's journals. She had packed them away after he died. Reading them had hurt too much. But now she made herself read them. Entry after entry, she saw him trying to reach her, trying to help her see her own biases. One entry from 10 years ago made her cry. Victoria is a brilliant woman and a dedicated teacher, but she has blind spots she refuses to acknowledge. Today she complained about a black student in her class, said he was not advanced material. I looked at his work. It was excellent, better than many of the students she praises. When I pointed this out, she got defensive, said I was being too sensitive, but I know what I saw. She graded his work looking for problems, not looking at what was actually good. I don't know how to help her see this about herself. Mrs. Hammond closed the journal and wept. Richard had seen it. He had tried to tell her, but she had dismissed him, called him too sensitive, too modern, too idealistic. She had defended herself instead of listening, instead of looking honestly at her own behavior. How many students had she hurt over the years? How many bright young people had she discouraged? How many had she graded unfairly? How many had she made to feel like they did not belong in her classroom? The number was probably higher than she could bear to know. But she had to face it, had to acknowledge the harm she had done. Only then could she begin to make things right. Mrs. Hammond looked at Amara's file from the office. She had requested it during her recovery. Amara's transcript from Lincoln High showed straight A's in English. Teacher comments praised her writing, her insight, her class participation. Exceptional student. College ready. A joy to teach. And what grade was Amara getting in Mrs. Hammond's class after half a semester? A C+. Not because her work was C+ quality, but because Mrs. Hammond had decided from day one that Amara did not belong in advanced English. Mrs. Hammond picked up the letter she had written to Amara. She had rewritten it 5 times. Each version was more honest than the last. But words on paper were not enough. She needed to face Amara, needed to look her in the eye and admit what she had done, needed to make real changes, not just apologize. On Monday morning, Mrs. Hammond returned to school. She walked slowly, still favoring her ankle a bit. Teachers welcomed her back. Students said they were glad to see her. She smiled and thanked them, but inside she felt nervous, anxious, afraid. When would she see Amara? What would she say? How would the girl react? Mrs. Hammond had played the conversation in her mind 100 times. Each time it went differently. Sometimes Amara accepted her apology. Sometimes she rejected it. Sometimes she just walked away. All day, Mrs. Hammond waited. But Amara's class was not until the last period. The day dragged on. Mrs. Hammond taught her other classes, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept thinking about what she would say, how she would begin. Finally, the last period arrived. Students filed into room 204. Mrs. Hammond stood by her desk, her heart beating fast. Sarah Chen came in and gave her a cool look. The girl clearly knew about the unfair treatment. Probably other students knew too. Then Amara appeared in the doorway. She paused when she saw Mrs. Hammond was back. Their eyes met. Amara's expression was guarded, careful. She walked to her usual seat in the back corner. Mrs. Hammond wanted to call out to her, to stop her, to say something right then, but not in front of the whole class. This conversation needed to be private, needed to be done right. Before we begin today, Mrs. Hammond said when all students were seated, I want to say something. I want to thank Amara Johnson for her help when I fell in the parking lot 2 weeks ago. She acted quickly and stayed with me until help arrived. I am very grateful. The class looked back at Amara. Some students smiled. Others looked surprised, like they had not known about this. Amara's face showed nothing. She just nodded slightly. Mrs. Hammond continued the lesson, but she changed it. She had planned to continue with their usual curriculum. Instead, she started talking about Langston Hughes, about the Harlem Renaissance, about voices in American literature that deserved more attention. Some students looked confused. This was not what they had been studying. But Mrs. Hammond pressed on. She read I Too aloud to the class. The same poem Amara had written her essay about. The essay Mrs. Hammond had given a C. Tomorrow I will be making some changes to our curriculum, Mrs. Hammond said. We will include more diverse voices, more perspectives. American literature is richer than what I have been teaching you. I plan to fix that. When the bell rang, students gathered their things. Amara stood to leave. Mrs. Hammond spoke quickly. Miss Johnson, could you please stay after class? I need to speak with you. Amara hesitated. Sarah looked at her with concern. But Amara nodded. It's okay, she told Sarah quietly. I'll catch up with you. The classroom emptied. Then it was just the two of them, Mrs. Hammond and Amara, the teacher who had been cruel and the student who had been kind. The silence felt heavy. Mrs. Hammond took a deep breath. Please sit down. This will take a few minutes. Amara sat at a desk in the front row, not in the back corner. Mrs. Hammond noticed this, noticed how Amara sat up straight, her face calm but distant. Protecting herself. Expecting more hurt, maybe. More unfairness. I need to say something to you. Mrs. Hammond began. Her voice shook slightly. And I need you to hear all of it before you respond. Can you do that? Amara nodded. Yes, ma'am. I have treated you terribly since you came to this school. Not just poorly, not just unfairly, terribly. I graded your work more harshly than everyone else's. I ignored you in class. I dismissed your contributions. I assigned you that insulting project topic. I did all of this because... She paused. The next words were the hardest. I did all of this because of the color of your skin, because of who you are, because I had decided before you ever spoke that you did not belong in my advanced class. Amara's face changed slightly, like she had known this truth, but hearing it spoken out loud still hurt. I was wrong, Mrs. Hammond continued. Not just wrong. I was prejudiced. I was racist. I let attitudes I learned as a child control how I treated you. I told myself I was just maintaining standards. That I was being objective? But I was lying to myself. I was treating you differently because I saw you as different, as less than. Tears filled Mrs. Hammond's eyes, but she did not wipe them away. She needed to say this, all of it. When you helped me in that parking lot, I could not understand why. I had been so cruel to you, so dismissive. You had every reason to walk away, to leave me there. But you didn't. You stopped to help. You called for help. You stayed with me. You showed me kindness I did not deserve. Your kindness made me face what I had been doing, what I had been my whole life, maybe. I spent these 2 weeks reading your work again. Really reading it this time. It's excellent, Amara. Your work is excellent. It has always been excellent. But I refused to see it. I graded you looking for problems instead of seeing what was actually there. Mrs. Hammond pulled a folder from her desk. These are your assignments from this semester. With new grades, fair grades, honest grades. Your essays are A's and B pluses. Your work is strong and insightful. I should have told you this from the beginning. I should have encouraged you instead of trying to push you out. She handed the folder to Amara. The girl took it with trembling hands. She opened it and looked at the papers inside. At the new grades written in red pen. At the comments that said excellent analysis and strong argument and well done. Amara's eyes filled with tears. She looked up at Mrs. Hammond. Why did you hate me? What did I do? The question broke Mrs. Hammond's heart. You did nothing wrong. Nothing at all. The problem was me. My prejudice. My refusal to see beyond my own narrow view of the world. You deserved better. You deserved a teacher who saw your potential and helped you grow. Instead, you got me. Someone who tried to tear you down. I don't expect you to forgive me, Mrs. Hammond said. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that I am going to change. Really change. Not just in how I treat you, but in how I teach. I am redesigning my curriculum to include voices I have ignored. I am going to work on my biases. I am going to do better. I also want you to know that your kindness changed my life. When you helped me in that parking lot, you showed me what real character looks like. Real strength. You chose to be better than my behavior. That is remarkable. The room was quiet for a long moment. Amara looked at the folder in her hands. Then she looked at Mrs. Hammond. Her eyes were wet with tears, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Thank you for saying these things. For admitting what you did. That takes courage, she paused. But you hurt me. You made me doubt myself. I worked so hard in your class. I did everything right. And you made me feel like I didn't belong. Like I wasn't good enough. Do you know what that feels like? No, Mrs. Hammond said honestly. I don't. I have never experienced that. I have always been welcomed. Always been given the benefit of the doubt. I took that for granted. I did not think about what it was like for people who don't have that experience. I helped you in the parking lot because my mother raised me to help people who need it. Not because they deserve it. Not because they earned it. But because it's the right thing to do. Amara's voice was stronger now. But you're right that words aren't enough. I've been hurt too much. I need to see that you really mean what you're saying. I need to see real change. Not just with me, but with everyone. You will, Mrs. Hammond said. I promise you will see change. Real change. Lasting change. Amara stood up, holding the folder. I accept your apology. But I can't say I trust you yet. Trust has to be earned. That takes time. I understand. That's more than fair. Amara walked to the door. Then she turned back. Mrs. Hammond? Thank you for being honest. A lot of people would have just kept going like nothing happened. At least you're trying to face what you did. That's something. After Amara left, Mrs. Hammond sat at her desk for a long time. The conversation had been painful. Necessary, but painful. She had admitted truths about herself that shamed her. But Amara was right. Admission was just the first step. Real change would take time, take work, take sustained effort. But Mrs. Hammond was ready to do that work. She had to. She owed it to Amara. She owed it to every student she had ever taught unfairly. She owed it to Richard, who had tried so hard to help her see. She owed it to herself, to become the person she should have been all along. That evening, Mrs. Hammond attended a school board meeting. She had requested time to speak. When her turn came, she stood at the podium. Her hands shook, but her voice was clear. I am here tonight to request that the district implement bias training for all teachers, she said. Mandatory training that addresses how our prejudices affect our teaching, how we grade students, how we interact with them, how we either help them succeed or hold them back. Several board members looked surprised. Other teachers in the audience shifted in their seats. This was not a comfortable topic. I am making this request because I have recently been forced to confront my own biases, Mrs. Hammond continued. I have treated students unfairly. I have let prejudice guide my teaching. I have caused harm. I suspect I am not the only teacher in this district who needs to face these truths about themselves. She spoke for 10 minutes. She did not name Amara, did not share details that would embarrass the girl, but she spoke honestly about the need for change, about the importance of treating all students fairly, about seeing beyond our own narrow perspectives. When she finished, the room was quiet. Then the superintendent spoke. Thank you, Mrs. Hammond, for your honesty. This is an important conversation. We will take your request seriously. It was not a promise, but it was a start. Mrs. Hammond also volunteered to mentor struggling students. She asked to work specifically with students of color who needed extra support in English. The counseling office was surprised but grateful. They had many students who could benefit from one-on-one help. Every day after school, Mrs. Hammond stayed late. She worked with students on their essays, helped them find their voices, encouraged them, praised their strengths, gave honest, constructive feedback about their weaknesses. It felt good. It felt right. This was what teaching was supposed to be. Seeing potential in every student, helping them grow, building them up instead of tearing them down. In her classroom, she made changes to her curriculum. She added Toni Morrison to the reading list, James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, Zora Neale Hurston, Sandra Cisneros. She taught these authors with the same respect and depth she gave to the traditional canon. Students noticed the changes. Some embraced them immediately. Others needed time to adjust. But slowly, the atmosphere in room 204 began to shift. It became less cold, less rigid, more open to different voices and perspectives. Amara watched all of this happen. She remained cautious, watchful. She participated in class more now. Mrs. Hammond called on her regularly and listened to her answers with respect, praised her insights, gave her the encouragement she had deserved from day one. But Amara kept her distance. She was polite but guarded. She did not trust easily, not anymore. And Mrs. Hammond understood why. She had broken that trust, shattered it. Building it back would take a long time. Maybe it would never fully return. That was Amara's choice to make, but Mrs. Hammond kept trying, kept showing up, kept being better, because that was all she could do. Change herself, change her teaching, be the person she should have been all along. It was not enough to fix the past. Nothing could fix that. But it was something, and something was better than nothing. Something was a start. 5 months passed. Winter came and went. Spring arrived with warm breezes and flowering trees. The semester was ending. Soon final exams would begin. Then summer break. Then Amara's senior year. Mrs. Hammond sat at her desk early one morning looking at the classroom that had changed so much. The walls now held posters of diverse authors. Toni Morrison and Langston Hughes alongside Hemingway and Frost. Quotes from Maya Angelou and James Baldwin. The room felt different now. More welcoming. More honest about what American literature really was. Her teaching had changed too. She called on all students equally. She graded fairly, looking for what was good in their work before marking what needed improvement. She encouraged students who struggled. She challenged students who excelled. She treated each one as an individual with potential. It had not been easy. Changing lifelong habits never was. Sometimes she caught herself falling into old patterns, expecting less from certain students, being more generous with others. But she noticed it now. Caught herself. Corrected course. That was the difference. She was aware now. She paid attention to her own behavior. The school board had approved bias training for all teachers. Mrs. Hammond had helped develop the program. She shared her own story, though she still did not mention Amara by name. Other teachers had been resistant at first, defensive, but slowly some had begun to listen, to reflect, to acknowledge their own blind spots. Change was slow, frustratingly slow, but it was happening. Mrs. Hammond's mentoring program had grown. She now worked with 15 students after school, helping them with their writing, building their confidence. Several of them were applying to colleges. Some would be the first in their families to go. Mrs. Hammond helped them with their application essays, wrote letters of recommendation that highlighted their true potential. One of those students was Marcus, a black junior who struggled with writing. When he first came to her, he was defensive, angry even. He had been told too many times that he was not good enough, not smart enough, that he belonged in lower-level classes, but Mrs. Hammond saw his potential. She worked with him patiently, helped him find his voice. Within 3 months, his writing had improved dramatically. More importantly, his confidence had grown. He believed in himself now. That belief would take him further than any grammar lesson. "Mrs. Hammond," Marcus said one afternoon, "why do you do this?
Stay late to help us?"
Most teachers just want to go home." Mrs. Hammond thought about how to answer. "Because I used to be someone who gave up on students too easily, who decided they could not succeed before giving them a real chance. I am trying to be different now, better." "Well, it's working," Marcus said. "You're pretty good at this teaching thing," she smiled. "Thank you, Marcus. That means a lot." With Amara, things had improved but remained complicated. The girl participated actively in class now. Her grades were what they should have been from the start. Mostly A's with an occasional B+ on particularly challenging assignments. Mrs. Hammond praised her work regularly, called on her, listened to her insights. But there was still distance between them. Politeness but distance. Amara was cordial but guarded. She did not stay after class to chat like some students did. She did not seek Mrs. Hammond's advice or guidance. She did what was required, did it well, but kept her emotional distance. Mrs. Hammond understood. She had broken something that could not be easily fixed. Maybe could never be completely fixed. That was the consequence of her actions. Some wounds healed with scars that remained forever. But then something happened that changed things slightly. The school held its annual academic awards ceremony in May. It was a formal event in the auditorium. Students received recognition for their achievements. Parents attended. Teachers presented awards. Mrs. Hammond was presenting the English Department Award. This award went to the student with the highest achievement in English, across all grades. It came with a small scholarship and recognition at graduation. Mrs. Hammond stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. She saw students in their best clothes, parents smiling proudly, teachers sitting in the back rows, and there in the middle section she saw Amara sitting with her mother. "The English Department Award," Mrs. Hammond began, "goes to a student who has demonstrated excellence in writing, analysis, and class participation, a student who brings insight and dedication to their work, a student who understands that literature is not just about books, but about understanding ourselves and the world around us." She paused. "This year's recipient wrote an essay about Langston Hughes that moved me deeply. She wrote about dignity and hope, about claiming your place at the table, about being seen and valued. Her words were powerful because they came from someone who understands these themes not just intellectually, but personally." Amara's face changed. She looked surprised, uncertain. "This student also taught me something more important than any lesson I have ever taught. She taught me about kindness, about choosing to help someone even when they do not deserve it, about being better than someone else's bad behavior." Mrs. Hammond's voice grew stronger. "I have been teaching for 30 years, but this year I learned more than I taught. I learned about my own biases, my own failures, my own need to grow and change, and I learned these things because one student showed me grace I did not deserve." The audience was very quiet now. Everyone was listening. "The English Department Award goes to Amara Johnson." The audience erupted in applause. Amara sat frozen for a moment. Then her mother hugged her, tears streaming down her face. Sarah Chen, sitting nearby, cheered loudly. Other students clapped and whistled. Amara walked to the stage slowly. She climbed the steps. Mrs. Hammond held out the award certificate. Their eyes met. For the first time in months, Amara's guard dropped slightly. Mrs. Hammond saw something there. Not quite trust, not quite forgiveness, but something softer than before. Something that looked like understanding. "You earned this," Mrs. Hammond said quietly as Amara took the certificate. "You earned it with your excellent work. I'm sorry it took me so long to see that." Amara nodded. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and briefly touched Mrs. Hammond's arm. Just a small gesture, a moment of connection. Then she walked to the microphone. "Thank you," Amara said to the audience. "This means a lot to me. English is my favorite subject. I love reading. I love writing. I love how books can help us understand each other better. She paused and looked at Mrs. Hammond. I also want to say something. Change is hard. Admitting when you are wrong is hard. But it is important. Mrs. Hammond made mistakes, but she owned them. She apologized. And more importantly, she changed her behavior. She worked to be better. That takes courage. I respect that. The applause was warm and genuine. Amara left the stage and returned to her seat. Her mother hugged her tightly. Mrs. Hammond watched them and felt tears in her eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of hope. Because maybe, just maybe, she had done something right. Maybe she had begun to make amends for the harm she had caused. After the ceremony, parents and students mingled in the lobby. Mrs. Hammond stood near the wall, unsure if she should approach Amara and her mother. The decision was made for her when they walked over. Amara's mother was a small woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Mrs. Hammond, I am Amara's mother, Patricia Johnson. It is nice to meet you, Ms. Johnson. I want to thank you, Patricia said. The words surprised Mrs. Hammond. Thank you for recognizing my daughter's abilities. Thank you for that award. She deserved it. She did deserve it. Her work has been exceptional all year. Patricia studied Mrs. Hammond's face for a moment. Amara told me what happened, how things started and how they changed. It takes strength to admit when you are wrong, to actually change. Not many people do that. Mrs. Hammond felt her throat tighten. I have a lot to make up for. Not just with Amara, but with many students over many years. Maybe so. But you are trying. That matters. Patricia squeezed her daughter's shoulder. Amara's father died when she was young. I raised her alone. I taught her to work hard and to help others. Even when it is difficult. Even when they have hurt you. She helped you when you fell because that is who she is. Not because you deserved it, I know. Her kindness changed my life. Patricia nodded. Good, then use that change to help other students. That is how you make amends. Not just by apologizing, but by being better going forward. I will. I am, I promise. Amara had been quiet during this exchange. Now she spoke. Mrs. Hammond, can I ask you something? Of course, why did you really change? Was it just because I helped you? Or was there something more? Mrs. Hammond thought carefully about her answer. This question deserved honesty. Your kindness was the catalyst. It forced me to face what I had been doing. But the real reason I changed was because I finally let myself see the truth about who I had become, about the harm I had caused, about the prejudices I had carried my whole life without questioning them. I read books I had ignored. I read my late husband's journals and saw how he tried to help me see these things when he was alive. I looked at my own behavior honestly for the first time. It was painful, shameful, but necessary. So it was not just about me. No, you were the beginning. But the change had to be deeper than that. It had to be about recognizing a pattern of behavior, a lifetime of biases, and choosing to confront those things and do better. Amara nodded slowly. Okay, I just wanted to understand. They talked for a few more minutes. Then the Johnsons said goodbye. Mrs. Hammond watched them leave arm in arm, Amara holding her award certificate. She felt something she had not felt in a long time. Not quite peace, but something close to it. A sense that maybe she was on the right path now. That maybe she could become the teacher she should have been all along. The school year ended 2 weeks later. Final exams came and went. Amara scored the highest grade in Mrs. Hammond's class. When Mrs. Hammond posted the final grades, she added a note to Amara's report. Exceptional work this semester. You are a talented writer and thinker. I wish you the very best in your senior year and beyond. Over the summer, Mrs. Hammond continued her work. She read more books by diverse authors. She revised her entire curriculum for the next school year. She attended workshops on equity in education. She had difficult conversations with other teachers about bias in grading and teaching. Some of her colleagues were receptive. Others were defensive. One teacher, Mr. Barrett, accused her of being too politically correct and trying to lower standards. Mrs. Hammond stood her ground. Having high standards and being fair are not opposites, she told him. I have high standards for all my students, but I also have to examine whether I am applying those standards equally, whether I'm seeing each student clearly or seeing my own expectations and biases. Mr. Barrett walked away unconvinced, but Mrs. Hammond had planted a seed. Maybe he would think about it later. Maybe he would start to question his own practices. Change happened slowly, one person at a time. When fall arrived and a new school year began, Amara returned as a senior. She was not in Mrs. Hammond's class this year. She was taking AP English with a different teacher, but sometimes Amara stopped by room 204 to say hello, to ask advice about her college essays, to share what she was reading. These visits were brief but meaningful. The relationship between them was not close. It probably never would be. Too much had happened. But there was respect now. Mutual respect, and that was something. One afternoon in October, Amara came by after school. Mrs. Hammond was working with a student, helping him with his essay. Amara waited until they finished. "Mrs. Hammond, I wanted to tell you something," Amara said. "I got accepted to my first choice college. Early admission." Mrs. Hammond stood and smiled widely. "Amara, that is wonderful. Congratulations. I am so proud of you. Thank you. And thank you for the letter of recommendation you wrote. My counselor said it was really strong. I wrote the truth. You are an exceptional student. Any college would be lucky to have you." Amara shifted her weight. "I also wanted to say, I have been thinking about what happened last year, how you changed. I have talked to my mother about it, about forgiveness and growth and all that." Mrs. Hammond waited, her heart beating faster. "I have decided that I do forgive you, not because what you did was okay. It was not okay, but because holding on to anger was hurting me more than you, and because you really have changed. I see it. Everyone sees it. You are a better teacher now, a better person." Mrs. Hammond felt tears fill her eyes. "Thank you, Amara. That means more than you know. But I also want you to know something else. You hurt me. You made me doubt myself. There were nights I cried because of how you treated me, days I wanted to quit. I almost gave up on my dream of going to college because you made me feel like I was not smart enough. I am so sorry. I know you are. And I accept that. But I want you to understand the real impact, not just grades or assignments, but the emotional damage, the way it made me question myself. That kind of hurt takes a long time to heal. I understand, and I will carry that knowledge with me. I will remember it every day when I teach, when I interact with students. I will never forget the harm that unfairness causes, the damage that prejudice does." Amara nodded. "Good. Then something positive came from something bad. That is the best we can hope for sometimes." She turned to leave, then looked back. "Mrs. Hammond, thank you for being honest, for changing, for trying. Not everyone would do that." After Amara left, Mrs. Hammond sat at her desk for a long time. She thought about the journey of the past year, about falling in a parking lot, about a kind student who stopped to help, about facing ugly truths about herself, about the hard work of changing lifelong patterns of thought and behavior. She thought about her late husband, Richard, and wished he could see her now. He would be proud, she thought. Proud that she finally understood what he had tried to teach her. Proud that she was doing the work. Proud that she was trying to be better. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across the classroom. Mrs. Hammond looked at the posters on her walls. The diverse faces of American authors. The quotes about justice and dignity and hope. She still had so much work to do. So many more students to teach fairly. So many more biases to confront in herself and others. So many more ways to grow and change. But she was ready for that work. She was committed to it. Not just for Amara, though she would always be grateful to that brave young woman, but for all students, for the profession she had chosen, for the memory of her husband, for herself. Mrs. Hammond turned off the lights in room 204 and walked slowly down the empty hallway. Her ankle sometimes still ached when it rained, a reminder of that fall, of that day that changed everything. But the ache was not just physical. It was a reminder of the pain she had caused, the students she had hurt, the potential she had crushed. She would carry that pain with her always, not as punishment but as motivation, as a reason to keep doing better, to keep seeing clearly, to keep treating every student with the fairness and respect they deserved. Outside, the autumn air was cool and fresh. The sky was painted orange and pink. Mrs. Hammond walked to her car slowly, thinking about tomorrow's lessons, about the students she would teach, about the young minds she could help shape. She was not a perfect teacher. She never would be, but she was better than she had been. And every day she worked to be better still. That was all she could do. All anyone could do. Acknowledge their mistakes, make amends where possible, and commit to being better going forward. As she drove home through the quiet streets, Mrs. Hammond thought about Amara's words. Something positive came from something bad. That was the best outcome she could have hoped for. She had caused harm, real harm, but she had faced it, admitted it, changed because of it, and that change had rippled outward, to other students she now mentored, to the bias training she had helped create, to other teachers who were beginning to question their own practices, to the curriculum she had redesigned, to the more inclusive, more honest version of American literature she now taught. One act of unexpected kindness had started all of this. Amara kneeling beside her in that parking lot, choosing compassion over resentment, choosing to help even when help was not deserved. That kindness had broken something open in Mrs. Hammond, had forced her to see, had given her the chance to change. She had taken that chance, and she would honor it every day for the rest of her teaching career. She would remember the girl who showed her grace she did not deserve, the girl who taught her that being better than someone's bad behavior was possible. That change, real change, was always possible if you had the courage to face yourself honestly. Mrs. Hammond pulled into her driveway as the last light faded from the sky. She sat in her car for a moment, looking at her house. The big empty house she had lived in alone for 5 years. But it did not feel quite as empty anymore. Because she had purpose now. She had work to do, students to teach fairly, biases to confront, change to create, a lifetime of mistakes to make up for. It would take the rest of her career, maybe longer. The harm she had caused over 30 years could not be undone, but it could be balanced perhaps by the good she did going forward, by the students she helped, by the fair treatment she gave them, by the teacher she had finally become. Mrs. Hammond got out of her car and walked to her door. Inside, on the mantel, Richard's photo smiled at her. She smiled back. "I finally understand," she said to his picture. "I finally see what you were trying to show me. I wish you were here to see it too. But I think you know. Somehow I think you know." She made herself dinner, graded some papers, read for a while, and when she went to bed that night, she slept better than she had in years. Because for the first time in a long time, she was at peace with who she was becoming. Not who she had been, but who she was working to be, and that made all the difference.